Sitting in my son's freezing garage, I clutched the purse containing a $33 million winning lottery ticket. The boy who once called me Mom now called me a burden, right to my face. I smiled, said nothing. But in that moment, I knew I would disappear. I wanted to see how my family would treat me when they thought I had nothing left. The cold seeped through my thin coat, but the chill in my heart ran deeper. This wasn't about revenge. It was about discovering the truth I'd been too afraid to face for years. My name is Evelyn Carter, and at 72 years old, I thought I knew everything about the people I'd raised. For 47 years, I'd worked as a nurse at Mapleford Community Hospital, watching families come together in crisis and fall apart over money. I'd seen grown children fight over inheritance while their parents lay dying. I'd witnessed the best and worst of humanity in those sterile corridors. Never did I imagine I'd experience it firsthand. The morning everything changed started like any other. I woke at 5:30 a.m. in my old Victorian house on Elm Street, the same house where I'd raised David and Melissa after their father passed 20 years ago. The floorboards creaked under my feet as I made my way to the kitchen, a sound that had become my only morning companion. I'd bought the Powerball ticket at Murphy's Corner store on Tuesday, same as I did every week. One ticket, same numbers. Our 3 birthdays and the date my husband died. Mrs. Murphy always smiled when she handed me my ticket, joking that one day I'd remember her when I won big. We'd laugh, and I'd tell her she'd be the first to know. That Thursday morning, I checked the numbers while sipping my coffee. I had to check them 7 times before my hands stopped shaking. $33 million. The coffee mug slipped from my fingers, shattering on the linoleum floor I'd been meaning to replace for 15 years. David, my eldest at 46, had become everything a mother could want on paper. Vice president at a tech firm, beautiful house in the suburbs, 2 kids in private school. But somewhere along the way, my sensitive boy who used to bring me dandelions had transformed into a man who checked his watch whenever he visited, always with somewhere more important to be. Melissa, 2 years younger, had inherited her father's silver tongue and my stubborn streak. She worked in real estate, always dressed impeccably, always ready with a compliment that never quite reached her eyes. She'd call me every Sunday at precisely 7 p.m., conversations timed like business meetings, 15 minutes of obligatory daughterly duty. I spent 3 days staring at that ticket, hidden in my late husband's tobacco tin in the kitchen drawer. 3 days of normal life, paying bills that suddenly seemed insignificant, watering plants that would outlive my time in this house, cooking meals for one in a kitchen meant for a family. The decision came to me during one of those lonely dinners. David had canceled our monthly lunch again. Important client meeting. Melissa had cut our last call short, showing a house to potential buyers. As I sat there, pushing green beans around my plate, I realized something. They didn't know me anymore. They knew the idea of me. Aging mother, retired nurse, widow in an old house, but they didn't know Evelyn. What would happen if that's all I was to them? Just an elderly woman with nothing to offer but nostalgic memories and increasing needs? The thought planted itself like a seed, growing roots before I could stop it. I made my choice. The ticket would remain my secret. Not out of spite or anger, but from a desperate need to know. Was I still their mother? Or had I become just another item on their to-do lists? Another problem to be managed between meetings and showings? That night, I called my financial advisor about a small windfall from an old investment. He agreed to help me claim the prize privately. In a week, I'd be wealthy beyond imagination. But first, I needed to know if I was poor in the only currency that truly mattered, my children's love. The test began 2 weeks after I'd quietly claimed my winnings. The money sat safely in accounts my children knew nothing about, while I continued living as if nothing had changed. I'd calculated everything carefully. The property tax bill wasn't due for another month, but I needed $3,000 for it, a reasonable amount, not so much that they'd think I was being careless with money, but enough to be a genuine need. I called David first. It was a Tuesday evening, 8:15 p.m. Late enough that he'd be home from work, but early enough that he couldn't claim he was heading to bed. "Hi, honey," I said, hearing the forced warmth in my own voice. "I hope I'm not interrupting. Mom." I could hear him typing in the background. "What's wrong? It's not Sunday." "Nothing's wrong, exactly. I need to ask you something." The typing stopped. "Is this about money?" How quickly he'd guessed. "The property tax bill came early this year. I'm a little short, just $3,000. I'll pay you back once my Social Security comes in next month." The silence stretched so long I wondered if we'd been disconnected. Then came the sigh. Long, heavy, the kind you give a child who's asked for candy before dinner. "Mom, we've talked about this. That house is too big for you. The maintenance, the taxes. Have you given any more thought to selling? The market's great right now. You could get a nice apartment, maybe in one of those senior communities with activities and—" "David, I just need a small loan. It's not about the money. Mom, it's about being practical. I've got the kids' tuition, the mortgage. Sarah's thinking about going back to school. Things are tight for everyone right now." Things were tight. In his 6-bedroom house with the 3-car garage? "I understand," I said quietly. "I'm sorry I asked. Don't be like that. I'm trying to help you see the bigger picture. Let me send you some listings for senior communities. They have medical staff on site, social activities." I hung up before he could finish painting his picture of my future. Melissa was next. I waited until the following morning, catching her between showings. "Mom, what a lovely surprise." Her voice was syrup-sweet, the tone she used with difficult clients. "How are you feeling? You're taking your medications, right?" "I'm fine, dear. I actually needed to talk to you about something." "Oh?" I heard her car door slam. "I've got about 10 minutes before my next appointment. What's on your mind?" I repeated my request. Word for word. The same calculated pause followed. "Oh, Mom." She managed to inject profound sadness into 2 words. "You know, if I had it, I'd give it to you in a heartbeat, but the market's been slow. And with the divorce last year, I'm barely keeping my head above water. The divorce where she'd gotten the house, the BMW, and half of her ex-husband's retirement fund. But listen," she continued, her voice brightening. "I was just showing the most beautiful assisted living facility yesterday. It's like a resort. They have a pool, a library, even wine tastings on Fridays. The residents there are so happy. Mom, they have friends, activities, medical care right there. You wouldn't have to worry about property taxes or maintenance or—" "I'm not interested in assisted living. Melissa, it's not like those old nursing homes. Mom, it's active senior living. You'd have your own apartment, your independence, but with support when you need it. Wouldn't it be nice not to be alone in that big house? Alone. As if I'd be less alone, surrounded by strangers instead of the ghosts of my memories. Thank you for the suggestion," I said. "I need to go." "Mom, wait. About the money. Maybe you could take out a reverse mortgage or sell some of Dad's old things. I saw an antique dealer who might—" I ended the call and sat in my kitchen, staring at the ceramic chickens on the windowsill that Melissa had given me 15 years ago, back when her gifts came from the heart instead of obligation. They'd both mentioned senior communities, assisted living, as if they'd discussed it already, planned my future in hushed phone calls and worried texts. Not because I was sick or incapable. I still volunteered at the hospital, still drove myself everywhere, still managed my own affairs. But because I'd become inconvenient, the test had begun, and already I was learning more than I'd wanted to know. The test continued over the next 3 weeks, each one carefully orchestrated to seem genuine. My old Buick, which had been running perfectly, suddenly needed a new transmission, or so I told David when I called him from the mechanic's shop I'd never actually visited. "Can't you just get it fixed later?" he'd said, irritation clear in his voice. "Take an Uber." "David, I need my car. I have doctor's appointments, grocery shopping." "Mom, this is exactly what I'm talking about. You shouldn't be driving anyway. Did you know seniors have the highest accident rates after teenagers? I hadn't had so much as a parking ticket in 40 years. The following week, I called Melissa in tears, genuine ones, though not for the reason she thought. I told her the power company was threatening disconnection. $200. That's all I needed. Oh, Mom, how did you let it get this bad? She spoke to me like I was a child who'd forgotten her homework. You need to set up automatic payments. I'll email you instructions. As for the money, things are really tight right now. Maybe you could ask the church. They have emergency funds for situations like this. The church, where I'd volunteered for 30 years, where I'd organized countless fundraisers for families in need. Now I was supposed to become one of those families, but it was the third test that broke my heart completely. I showed up at David's door on a Thursday evening, a small suitcase in hand. Sarah answered, her smile faltering when she saw my luggage. "Evelyn, we weren't expecting you." "I'm sorry to drop by like this," I said, making my voice shaky. "The water heater burst. The whole basement is flooded. The plumber says it'll take a few days to fix everything. I just need somewhere to stay for a night or two." Why David appeared behind his wife, still in his work clothes. His eyes went immediately to my suitcase. "Mom, why didn't you call first?" "I did. You didn't answer." He pulled out his phone, frowning at the missed calls. "I was in meetings. Mom, we don't have the guest room set up. The kids have friends coming this weekend. Maybe a hotel would be." "I can sleep on the couch," I offered, hating myself for the test but needing to see it through. "That's not—" "Mom, be reasonable. There's a nice Holiday Inn downtown. I'll pay for it, okay? You'll be more comfortable there." His own mother. A Holiday Inn. Sarah at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. "David, surely we have plans." "Sarah," he said quietly, but I heard the warning in his tone. "Mom understands. Don't you—" "Mom?" I understood perfectly. It was Frank and Linda Matthews who restored my faith in human kindness. I'd met them only 6 months earlier at a church potluck, but when Linda saw me struggling with grocery bags the day after David's rejection, she insisted on helping. "Evelyn, honey, you don't look well," she said, studying my face with genuine concern. The kindness in her voice nearly undid me. "I'm fine, just tired. The house has been having some problems." Frank loaded the bags into my car while Linda kept her worried eyes on me. "Why don't you come for dinner tonight? I made too much pot roast, and it's no fun eating alone." Over dinner in their modest kitchen, the whole story spilled out, not about the lottery, but about my flooded basement, my children's rejections, my fears of becoming a burden. Linda reached across the table and took my hand. "You stay here," she said firmly. "We have a perfectly good guest room, and I won't hear another word about it." "I couldn't impose—" "Impose?" Frank shook his head. "Linda's been saying this house is too quiet since our kids moved away. You'd be doing us a favor." They wouldn't accept a penny. For 3 days. They treated me like family. Real family. The kind that doesn't check their watch when you're talking or calculate the cost of kindness. Linda made my favorite tea without being asked. Frank fixed a squeaky hinge on my car door that I'd mentioned in passing. They listened to my stories about my late husband without fidgeting or suggesting I move on. On my last morning there, as Linda packed me a container of homemade muffins, she said something that stayed with me. "Family isn't always blood. Evelyn. Sometimes it's the people who show up when you need them." I drove home to my empty house. $33 million richer than my neighbors knew, but feeling poorer than I'd ever been. My children had failed every test, while strangers had passed with flying colors. The money in my bank account couldn't buy what Frank and Linda had given freely, genuine care for an old woman who appeared to have nothing to offer in return. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a courier who required my signature. My hands trembled as I signed, not from age, but from recognizing the law firm's name, Preston, Morton and Associates. Charles Morton had been handling Eleanor Whitfield's affairs for decades. Eleanor and I had worked together at the hospital for 25 years. She'd never married, never had children, but she'd lived life on her own terms, traveling the world during her vacations, collecting art, investing wisely. When she retired to Florida 5 years ago, we'd kept in touch through letters and occasional phone calls. Her death 3 months ago had left a hole in my heart I hadn't expected. I sat at my kitchen table and opened the envelope with careful fingers. Dear Mrs. Carter. The letter began in Charles Morton's precise handwriting. As the executor of Eleanor Whitfield's estate, it is my duty to inform you that you have been named as a beneficiary in her will. Miss Whitfield has left you the sum of $200,000 and her property at 1847 Seaside Drive, Coral Cove, Florida. I had to read it 3 times before the words sank in. Enclosed was another envelope, sealed with Eleanor's personal wax stamp, a small hummingbird she'd always loved. Inside, her handwriting. Shakier than I remembered, but still distinctly hers. My dearest Evelyn, if you're reading this, then I finally embarked on that last great adventure we used to joke about during our night shifts. I want you to know that of all the people I've known in my 78 years, you were the only one who never tried to change me, fix me, or tell me how to live my life. The house in Coral Cove is my sanctuary, 2 bedrooms, a screened porch where you can hear the ocean, and a garden that needs someone who understands that beautiful things require patience and care. The neighbors are wonderful, especially the Jamaican couple next door who make the best jerk chicken you've ever tasted. The money is to ensure you can maintain the house and live comfortably. But more than that, Evelyn, it's to give you what you gave me all those years, freedom to choose. Don't let anyone, not even those you love, decide how you should spend your remaining years. You've earned the right to live for yourself. With all my love and gratitude, Eleanor P.S. The house has the most magnificent sunrise view. Promise me you'll watch at least 100 of them. I pressed the letter to my chest and wept. For Eleanor, for myself, for the strange turn my life had taken. 2 properties now, plus millions in the bank, yet my children thought I was 1 utility bill away from destitution. Charles Morton called that afternoon to discuss the details. Eleanor had been meticulous in her planning. The property taxes were paid for the next 5 years. The house was in perfect condition, and she'd even set aside a fund for maintenance. She spoke of you often, Charles said warmly. Said you were the sister she chose rather than the family she was given. She wanted to make sure you had options. Options, such a simple word. But I'd felt my options narrowing with each passing year, each concerned look from my children, each suggestion that I downsize, simplify, move somewhere more appropriate for my age. I spent the next week researching Coral Cove online. The house was a modest Spanish-style bungalow, pale yellow with white trim, surrounded by palm trees and bougainvillea. The neighborhood was a mix of retirees and young families, the kind of place where people still took evening walks and knew their neighbors' names. The beach was a 10-minute walk away. I called David and Melissa, separately, to share the news. Their reactions were predictable. "Mom, that's wonderful," David said, though he didn't sound like he thought it was wonderful at all. "But managing 2 properties at your age, and Florida is so far away, what if something happens to you?" "What if something happens to me here?" I countered. "That's different. We're here. We can help." Like they'd helped when I'd needed $3,000, when my water heater supposedly burst. But I kept those thoughts to myself. Melissa was more direct. "You're not seriously thinking of moving there, are you?" "Mom, all your doctors are here, your church, your whole life. And what about us? Your grandchildren?" "The grandchildren I saw twice a year, if I was lucky. The grandchildren who called me by my first name because Grandma makes them feel old. I'm just considering my options," I said mildly. "Well, if you do decide to sell it, I could handle that for you. The Florida market is hot right now. You could probably get quite a bit for a beachside property. That money could secure you a really nice place in assisted living for years." Always back to assisted living, as if turning 70 meant I'd lost the ability to live independently. That night, I looked at Eleanor's letter again, focusing on one line. "Don't let anyone, not even those you love, decide how you should spend your remaining years." Eleanor had known. Somehow. She'd known exactly what I needed to hear, exactly when I'd need to hear it. The house in Florida wasn't just a property. It was a lifeline, a chance to discover who Evelyn Carter could be when she wasn't defined by others' expectations. But I wasn't ready to make that leap yet. First, I needed to see just how far my children would go in their campaign to manage my life. The universe had given me two gifts, the lottery and Eleanor's legacy. It was time to see what my family would do when they discovered just one of them. The family dinner was scheduled for Sunday at 6 p.m., a command performance at David's house that I'd been summoned to rather than invited. The formal dining room was set with Sarah's best china, and I noticed Melissa's car already in the driveway when I arrived. Unusual, since she typically swept in 15 minutes late with breathless apologies. "Mom!" David greeted me at the door with more enthusiasm than he'd shown in years. Come in. Sarah made your favorite, pot roast." Sarah hadn't made pot roast for me since my 70th birthday. I smelled takeout containers hastily hidden in the kitchen trash. The dinner conversation started pleasantly enough. David asked about my health with unprecedented interest. Melissa complimented my dress, though I'd worn it to at least a dozen family gatherings without her noticing. Even the grandchildren had been coached to engage, asking about my garden and volunteer work with suspicious politeness. It wasn't until dessert, store-bought apple pie masquerading as homemade, that David cleared his throat. "Mom, Melissa and I have been talking." "Here it comes," I thought, carefully arranging my face into an expression of mild interest. "We're concerned about you." Melissa jumped in, reaching across the table to pat my hand. Living alone in that big house, especially now with this Florida property to worry about too. "I'm not worried about it," I said. David pushed on. "Mom, you called both of us for money recently. The property taxes, the car repairs, the power bill. It's clear you're struggling to manage your finances." The lies I told sat between us like uninvited guests. I let the silence stretch until Sarah shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "We want to help," Melissa said, producing a folder from her designer purse. "We've been doing some research on places that would be perfect for you. Active senior communities with medical staff, social activities, meal plans. You wouldn't have to worry about maintenance or bills or—" "I appreciate your concern," I interrupted, "but I'm quite capable of managing my own affairs." David and Melissa exchanged a look I wasn't supposed to catch. "Actually, Mom," David said, his voice taking on the careful tone he used in business negotiations, "we've been thinking about something else, too. Given your recent struggles, it might be wise to consider giving one of us power of attorney, just for financial matters. You'd still make all your own decisions, but we could help make sure bills get paid on time, manage the properties." "Absolutely not." The words came out sharper than I'd intended. Melissa's eyes widened with practiced hurt. "Mom, we're trying to help. With the inheritance from Eleanor, you have assets now that need proper management. At your age, at my age, I've been managing my finances since before either of you were born." "But you just asked us for money." David's patience cracked. "You couldn't handle a $3,000 tax bill, but you think you can manage 2 properties?" I stood up slowly, my napkin falling to my plate. "I think it's time I went home." "Mom, please," Sarah finally spoke up. "They're just worried. With everything that's been happening—" "What's been happening?" I said quietly. "Is that I've discovered exactly where I stand with my children. Thank you for dinner." David followed me to the door. "Mom, be reasonable. The lawyer can come to the house, just to talk." "Tom Brennan. He specializes in elder law. He could explain your options." "I know my options, David." "Do you?" His mask slipped completely. "Because from where I'm standing, you're being stubborn and irresponsible. That Florida property could sell for enough to set you up in a nice facility for years. Instead, you're going to what? Try to maintain 2 houses on Social Security?" I turned at the door, looking at my son, successful, accomplished, and utterly blind to who I really was. "Did it ever occur to you," I asked, "that I might have plans of my own?" He laughed. Actually laughed. "What plans? Mom, you're 72 years old." "Exactly," I said. "I'm 72, not dead." The drive home felt longer than usual. I thought about the folder Melissa had brought, no doubt full of glossy brochures for places with names like Sunset Gardens and Golden Years Manor. Places where I'd be safe, managed, contained, where my children could visit on scheduled days and feel good about taking care of Mom without actually having to take care of me. That night, I called Charles Morton at home. Eleanor had given me his personal number years ago. "Mrs. Carter," he said warmly. "How can I help you? I need to know something. If my children tried to petition for conservatorship or power of attorney, what would happen?" There was a pause. "Are you concerned about your mental capacity?" "No, I'm concerned about theirs." He chuckled. "Well, in Florida, with your permanent residence there, it would be extremely difficult for anyone to petition for conservatorship without clear evidence of incapacity. Medical evaluations, documented incidents, proof of inability to manage affairs. Simply being older and making decisions your children disagree with isn't grounds for conservatorship. And if I'm not a Florida resident, then it depends on your state's laws. Some states make it easier, especially if family members claim financial mismanagement or self-neglect. The process can move quickly if you're caught off guard." After we hung up, I sat in Eleanor's favorite chair, she'd given it to me when she moved, and made my decision. My children had shown their hand. They saw me not as their mother, but as a problem to be solved, assets to be managed, an old woman to be filed away safely. They had no idea that the struggling old woman they wanted to control was worth $33 million, but they'd shown me enough. It was time to show them exactly what Evelyn Carter was capable of at 72 years old. The meeting with Tom Brennan was scheduled for Thursday at 2 p.m. My children had moved fast, within days of our disastrous dinner. They'd arranged what they called a consultation, but what I recognized as an ambush. David insisted on holding it at his office. "Neutral ground," he said, though there was nothing neutral about the gleaming conference room designed to intimidate. I arrived 15 minutes early. My best purse on my arm, the one my children didn't know contained a lottery ticket receipt worth $33 million. "Mrs. Carter." Tom Brennan was younger than I'd expected, all white teeth and aggressive handshake. "Your children have told me so much about you." "I'm sure they have," I said, taking the seat across from him. David and Melissa flanked him like lieutenants. "Now, I want to assure you this is just an informal discussion about protecting your assets and ensuring your wishes are respected as you age." "My wishes," I repeated. "How thoughtful." He opened a leather folder full of documents. "Your children are concerned about your recent financial struggles, multiple requests for money, difficulty managing properties." "Did they mention they refused every request?" Brennan's smile never wavered. "They're trying to help you make responsible decisions. This power of attorney would simply allow David, as your eldest, to assist with financial matters. You'd retain full autonomy over personal decisions." "How generous." Melissa leaned forward. "Mom, we found out you've been late on several bills. The bank called David about suspicious activity on your accounts." That was a lie. I hadn't been late on a bill in 40 years, and there was no suspicious activity unless you counted the private account where millions sat quietly earning interest. "Which bank?" I asked calmly. "What?" Melissa blinked. "Which bank called David? I'd like to file a complaint. They have no authorization to discuss my accounts with anyone." David shifted uncomfortably. "The point is, Mom, we're worried." "No," I said, reaching into my purse. "The point is, you're lying." I pulled out the lottery ticket receipt and placed it on the gleaming conference table. For a moment, nobody moved. "What's that?" Brennan asked. "Proof that I don't need my children's help managing my finances." David picked up the receipt, his face cycling through confusion, disbelief, and finally, shock. "This is... Mom, is this real?" $33 million, I said calmly, claimed privately 6 weeks ago. "Currently sitting in properly managed accounts, thank you very much." The silence was beautiful. Melissa's mouth actually fell open. Brennan looked like someone had slapped him with his own leather folder. You won the lottery," Melissa's voice cracked. "And you didn't tell us? Why would I? According to you, I can't manage my finances. According to David, I need supervision. Why would I burden you with news of my little windfall? 33 million isn't little. David stood up, pacing. Mom, do you have any idea? We need to protect this money. You need proper financial planning, tax attorneys. All handled, I interrupted. By professionals I hired myself, because despite what you believe, I'm neither senile nor stupid. We never said, Melissa started. No, you just tried to trick me into signing over control of my life because I asked to borrow $3,000, which, by the way, I never needed. I was testing you, and you failed. Brennan was frantically flipping through his documents. Mrs. Carter, with assets of this size, it's even more crucial to have safeguards in place. Mr. Brennan, I said, standing up. I'm 72 years old. I worked for 47 years, raised 2 children, buried a husband, and managed to survive without their help. I don't need safeguards. I need my family to treat me like a human being instead of a problem to be solved. Mom, wait. David's business facade cracked completely. We were trying to help. We thought you were struggling. Because I asked for help? Once? And you turned me away? We didn't know. Exactly. I picked up my purse. You didn't know. You didn't ask. You just assumed I was a dotty old woman who needed to be managed. Well, now you know better. Melissa found her voice. What are you going to do with the money? I smiled. Whatever I want. Isn't that the point of having it? But we're your children. The mask slipped completely, revealing the greed underneath. Don't we deserve to know your plans? You deserve exactly what you've earned, I said, heading for the door, which, based on your recent behavior, is nothing. Mom, David called after me. This is crazy. You can't just walk away from your family. I turned at the door, looking at my children, strangers now, revealed in their true colors. Watch me, I said. The elevator ride down felt like ascending. Each floor that passed lifted weight from my shoulders. In the parking garage, I sat in my car and laughed, really laughed, for the first time in months. They knew now. The secret was out. But instead of bringing us together, it had shown me exactly what I'd suspected. They didn't want to help me. They wanted to help themselves to me, my money, my autonomy, my remaining years. That night, I called Charles Morton again. How quickly can we make the Florida house my primary residence? If you're serious about moving, we can have everything transferred within 48 hours. Florida's homestead laws will protect your primary residence from any claims. Do it, I said. And Charles? I'll need a moving company, a discreet one. The call from Charles Morton came at 7:30 a.m. on Friday, just as I was packing my mother's china. Evelyn, I'm glad I caught you. We may have a situation. My paralegal was at the courthouse this morning filing your residency paperwork, and she overheard something concerning. Your son was there with a different attorney, inquiring about emergency conservatorship procedures. My hands stilled on the bubble wrap. How long do I have? In this state, they can file for an emergency temporary conservatorship with a judge's order. If they claim immediate danger to your welfare or assets, it could be granted within 48 hours, sometimes less. Once that happens, your accounts could be frozen pending a full hearing. 48 hours. David had always been efficient. What do you recommend? Leave. Today. Once you're in Florida with established residency, their filing here becomes much more complicated. They'd have to pursue it in Florida courts, where the burden of proof is significantly higher. I hung up and looked around my kitchen, at the half-packed boxes and the life I'd thought I had time to wrap up properly. Then I called Frank Matthews. Frank, I need help, and I need you to trust me without asking too many questions. God bless him. He didn't hesitate. What do you need? Within an hour, Frank and Linda were at my door. Linda took one look at my face and pulled me into a hug. Honey, you look like you're running from something. In a way, I am. I handed Frank a list. I need these things from the house packed and ready to ship. The movers are coming at 3 p.m. Everything else can be sold or donated. Evelyn, what's happening? Linda's eyes were full of concern. I chose my words carefully. My children are trying to take control of my life. Legal control. I need to leave before they can file the paperwork. Frank's face darkened. Those kids of yours. after everything you've done for them. Will you help me? You even have to ask? We worked in efficient silence, 3 old friends who understood that sometimes love means not asking questions. Linda wrapped my photos while Frank dismantled my computer. I focused on the essentials, important papers, jewelry, the few irreplaceable mementos from my life with James. At noon, Melissa's car pulled into the driveway. I watched from the bedroom window as she knocked, then used her key when I didn't answer. Frank met her at the door. "Mrs. Matthews? What are you doing in my mother's house?" "Helping a friend," Linda said simply, continuing to tape a box. "Where is she?" "Not here," Frank said, blocking the doorway with his solid frame. "I need to see her. It's urgent." "Then you should have thought of that before you tried to have her declared incompetent," Linda said sweetly. Melissa's face flushed. "You don't understand. She's not thinking clearly. $33 million. She could lose everything to scammers or—" "The only scammers I see," Frank said, "are the ones who share her DNA." Melissa left, but I knew she'd be back with David. I had to move faster. By 2 p.m., my car was loaded with essentials. The movers would handle the rest, shipping what I wanted to Eleanor's house, my house now. Frank had arranged for a neighbor to watch the property until it's sold. "You sure about this?" Linda asked, pressing a thermos of coffee and a bag of her famous road trip sandwiches into my hands. "I've never been more sure of anything." "You'll call when you get there?" "Every day if you want." Frank handed me an envelope. "Gas money, and don't you dare argue." Inside was $500 and a note. "Family isn't always blood. Drive safe." I was pulling out of the driveway when David's BMW screeched around the corner. He jumped out, Melissa right behind him, both their faces twisted with panic and rage. "Mom, stop!" David ran toward the car. "You can't leave. We have a court order coming." I rolled down the window just enough to be heard. "Then you'd better serve it to my house in Florida." "This is insane. You're acting crazy. This proves you need help." "No," I said calmly. "This proves I don't need yours." "Mom, please." Melissa was actually crying, though I suspected it was more about the money than me. "We're trying to protect you." "From what? From living my own life?" "You're making a terrible mistake," David said, his voice cold now. "When you come crawling back, when you realize you can't handle this alone, then I'll call Frank and Linda," I said. "They've shown me more genuine care in 6 months than you have in years." I drove away, watching in my rearview mirror as my children stood in the street, their carefully laid plans unraveling. They'd call lawyers, maybe even try to follow me. But Charles had assured me that once I crossed the Florida state line, once I was in my own home with my residency established, their options would be limited. 10 hours. That's all I needed. 10 hours to drive from the life I'd built around other people's expectations to the one Eleanor had left me. A life where I could watch sunrises without permission, where I could spend my money or save it without judgment, where I could be Evelyn instead of just Mom. My phone rang constantly. David, Melissa. Unknown numbers that were probably lawyers. I turned it off somewhere around South Carolina, tossing it into the glove compartment with a smile. For the first time in my 72 years, I was completely, utterly free. The sunrise over the Atlantic was everything Eleanor had promised, a symphony of gold and coral that painted the sky like a masterpiece. I sat on my screened porch, coffee in hand, counting this as sunrise number 47 since I'd arrived in Coral Cove, only 53 more to go to keep my promise to Eleanor. My phone finally turned back on after 2 weeks of blessed silence, buzzed with an incoming video call, David and Melissa calling together. I almost declined, but curiosity won. I accepted, making sure the ocean view was visible behind me. "Hello, David, Melissa." They looked older somehow, stress etched in lines around their eyes. "Good. Mom." David's voice was carefully controlled. "We've been trying to reach you." "I know. The lawyers say—" Melissa paused, swallowing hard. "They say we can't challenge your residency, that you're legally competent, that we have no grounds." "Imagine that." "Mom, please." David leaned forward. "We're sorry. We handled this badly. We were just worried." "No," I interrupted. "You were greedy. There's a difference." "That's not fair." Melissa's composure cracked. You lied to us. You pretended to be poor, desperate. I asked my children for help. Twice, both times. You tried to ship me off to a nursing home. What exactly did I lie about? Silence. The waves crashed rhythmically behind me. Nature's perfect soundtrack. What do you want from us? David asked finally. Nothing. The word felt like freedom. I want absolutely nothing from you. You're our mother. Yes, I am. The mother you called a burden. The mother you tried to declare incompetent. The mother whose life you wanted to control the moment you smelled money. So that's it? Melissa's voice turned bitter. You're going to punish us forever? Cut us out of your life, out of your will? I laughed, surprising myself with how genuine it sounded. My will. Melissa. Honey, that money isn't yours. It was never yours. It's mine. I earned the right to decide what happens to it by surviving 72 years on this planet. But family shows up, I said quietly. Family helps without calculating the return on investment. Family doesn't try to lock you away when you become inconvenient. Mom, David tried again, his business voice returning. Let's be reasonable. You're alone down there. No support system. Actually, I smiled, I have wonderful neighbors. Bob and Carmen next door have adopted me as their white grandmother. I play cards with 3 other widows every Thursday. The church here actually lets me volunteer without checking my competency first. Imagine that. That's not the same as family, Melissa insisted. You're right, it's better. They like me for who I am, not what I'm worth. David's face darkened. So what now? You live your little beach life while we're up here wondering if our mother is even alive? You can call once a month. If you can manage a conversation without mentioning money, power of attorney, or assisted living, we'll talk. The moment any of those topics come up, I hang up. Once a month? Melissa looked genuinely hurt. Mom, that's cruel. No, I said, taking a sip of my coffee. Cruel is trying to steal your mother's autonomy because she asked for $3,000. Once a month is generous. What about holidays? Grandchildren's birthdays? David asked. Send photos, I'll send cards. When you can treat me like a person instead of a problem to be solved or a lottery ticket to be cashed, we can revisit. This is that woman's fault, Melissa spat. Eleanor. She put these ideas in your head. Eleanor, I said firmly, reminded me that I have value beyond being someone's mother, that I deserve to live my remaining years on my own terms. So yes, I suppose this is her fault. Thank God for her. Mom, David started, my offer stands. Once a month, take it or leave it. They exchanged glances, having one of those silent conversations that excluded me even when I was right there. We'll call next month, David said stiffly. Wonderful. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a Tai Chi class at 9:30. Tai Chi? Melissa's voice dripped condescension. Mom, be careful. At your age, I ended the call. The sun was fully up now, warming my face as I closed my eyes and breathed in the salt air. Somewhere out there. My children were probably raging about their crazy mother and the fortune they'd never touch. Let them. I had promises to keep. 53 more sunrises for Eleanor. Tai Chi classes for my new friend Maria. The church bazaar next week where I'd promised to run the book booth. I had a life to live. Finally. Fully on my own terms. At 72. I'd won more than the lottery. I'd won my freedom, and that, as Eleanor knew, was worth more than all the millions in the world. The waves continued their eternal dance, and I smiled, raising my coffee cup to the horizon. Here's to you, Eleanor, I whispered, and here's to whatever comes next. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'm curious to know where in the world you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. Sometimes the biggest lottery we can win is discovering who truly cares about us. What would you have done in Evelyn's shoes?